when we're doing some sort of idea development, we're all aware internally as a team, there'll be wild ideas, safe ideas, and something in the middle. So it's very rare that we go to a client with one. We've got a few suggestions, and it'll go through some editing. But there's a spectrum. This is nuts, and we appreciate that you probably won't like this, but we want to put it here anyway because I think it'd be really cool. And then here's 2 steps down from that, and then here's 2 steps down from that, and eventually we get to something that's super safe.
Daniel Moore, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me in my own studio. I appreciate it.
I know. You got the invite. You travelled all this way. It's much appreciated. But no, genuinely, welcome to the podcast. Excited for this. As I said in my intro, creativity comes with loads of caveats for me that you need to do all the hard graft first. And if you need to know what that hard graft is, either go back to the first few episodes of this podcast, or check out Daniel's with me and him chatting, which will be available at some point in the future, I'm sure, if not now. Because it's face-to-face and you've kindly allowed me to record in your beautiful studio, I'd quite like to put the heavy work on your shoulders today. And can you do your own intro, please?
Please, absolutely, no problem at all. I'm Daniel Moore, the creative director at Dissident. Dissident is a social first creative agency. I got a little bit of north in me then, a little social. Social first creative agency. But my background's in photography. I studied as a photographer, worked as a freelance photographer from forever, basically. As soon as I left university, I had a couple of jobs in studios and moved into freelance. But commercial photography and video production came a little bit later in my career. And started to see kind of the benefits broadly of offering regular content for our clients on social media. This was like quite early days, really, of like content creation. You wouldn't really have called it that back then. And so that was kind of the business model, and it continues to be the business model of Dissident, which is regular creative production and social media marketing. And kind of that's what we do, and I kind of lead a team of creatives and marketers to achieve that mainly for construction brands. We work a little bit in a few other areas. We have our kind of I call them fun clients, like kind of like small project stuff that's like not particularly great budgets, but kind of interesting and just gives us a little break from construction every now and again. But our heart and soul and our passion's the construction industry. For sure.
I'd just like to talk about creativity within construction. So if you think about what the industry is, it's full of creativity, from the architectural designs to the way we actually construct buildings. Innovations are coming along all the time. So it's full of creativity, yet within marketing and the creative output in marketing, I think there is a lot left on the table, and there's a lot to be desired, really, the output for me isn't great. There's a lot of poor output creatively within the industry.
There's a lot of safety. There's a lot of safe creative.
Yeah, that's a better. I'd call it shite, but you can call it safety. There's a lot of safety in the industry. So how do you view creative's role, what you do within the industry?
I can speak specifically to our role.
Yeah, please.
Which is we accidentally became this agency that's quite focused on repositioning. So not top down like strategic repositioning. We're literally we're a lot lower down the rung of the ladder, and a brand is looking to reposition. They're looking to reposition to this audience, and they're coming to us to look for an agency that can differentiate them from their competitors. And there's usually a few parameters to that. We want to be a bit cooler. We want to appeal to a particular market. A lot of the time they're actually a foreign brand. So they're German or Swiss or something like that. They've typically get their creative from head office, which has got a very just doesn't resonate that well with the UK audience. They want something a bit more gritty and real and stuff like that. That's typically, where we're at when it comes to creativity is we're looking to like reposition brands for a particular audience, and I think that's really important. And you can't really do that with safe creative. I don't think. I think it's rarer. Traditionally, what you'd see creative in the construction industry as like catalogs, renders. Everything's quite safe, kind of bland, and sort of ubiquitous. Everything looks the same. You could get one catalog image that look exactly the same as another brand's catalog image, and it's all renders and white background stuff and things like that. And I think brands, especially manufacturers, we typically work with manufacturers that supply to trades. So it's kind of a little bit sexier. We work with some other more technical clients as well, but it's a little bit sexier because they're marketing towards the end user.
Okay.
So that's more. I wouldn't say it's more fun. If anything, it's kind of easier because you can make stuff that's kind of more around advertising it's closer to the general public than, say, an architect or something like that. I might have forgotten the question at this point, Peter, I'm afraid. What was the original question? What's creator's role in the industry?
Yeah. How do you view creativity?
So I think you can. So you have your strategy. You implement that, and you have these tactics. And a lot of the time, the creative is used in advertising and promotion, right? So that's we're a social media agency. So social media always comes first in my head. But you've got print marketing, you've got your website, you've got corporate video, which is I guess is kind of still website / YouTube, and things like billboards and stuff like that. And from our point of view, creative is there to make sure that your messaging is on point, your values are clear, and the positioning is solid. And I think where a lot of brands can potentially go wrong, especially when they're trying to do this stuff in-house, especially social media, is they'll get to a certain point where they go, right, this is the plan, this is what we want to do, this is the strategy and the tactics. And then they go over to social media and they kind of go, just go for it. Just do what you want. And they'll let the in-house team kind of like have a little play around on TikTok and make some silly videos and it's all a bit cringy and a bit naff, and then your positioning just it's gone at that point. I think for me, when it comes to your marketing touch points, especially with creative, it's got to be consistent. There's a few rules that you can break, but for the most part, if your catalogs look like this, your social media should look to be some variation of that. And I think that's the most important thing, is this kind of like being on brand, being on message, well positioned, but most importantly consistent across multiple platforms. And that's kind of my sort of broad view on creativity within construction. And I appreciate that for a lot of brands that sounds expensive, because you've got to do so many different things for so many different platforms. But for me, it's the best way of doing it.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be, hasn't it? To utilize various different platforms along a customer journey. Each one says a slightly different thing, moves them towards that end goal. It's got to be done, and the more budget you can put behind that, the better positioning, the better places you can get into. Be it trade publications, be it online, be it outdoor, wherever it might be it at events. The bigger stand, the better position. It just goes without saying. Okay, cool. So that's kind of how we see creativity in construction, but you still have to bring that creativity. You still have to create something for various different clients, and all that means being slightly different for each one, because you don't want it to be samey, etc., etc. So where do you start with crafting engaging content? What's your creative process, or is it different depending on the client? It's
very different depending on the client, and that's usually down to the fact that whether they'll give us a good brief, a bad brief, or no brief at all. So if they give us a good brief, then at least we've got something to work with. And when we get a good brief, that doesn't mean that there's always room for creativity in a brief. A brief typically will very rarely touch on the creative elements, or it might give a few hints. A good brief. A bad brief is usually the shots that they need in some sort of spreadsheet. And that's not to say that's still better than no brief.
Yeah,
and sometimes that's really helpful. and of course no brief, which leaves it's a conversation, which allows for not necessarily errors, but just kind of no one's super clear on what this is going to look like. So it's very much, as a creative agency, we've got an idea of what this wants to look like, and we're hoping that we're going to make this work. And then there's a lot of sort of back and forth and stuff like that. So the process changes definitely sort of client to client. And also if we've done it before. So typically in our industry and what we do, it's very rare that we do the same thing twice, and that's sort of by design, because we don't want to do the same thing we did for that person or that client, or it might be down to the fact we're always trying to be sort of push the bar a little bit further. So we're trying to be a little bit unique, try a different skill, do something different. So there's that element to it as well. But I think a lot of it, whatever's happening, I'm always thinking about what the end user, the end viewer is going to experience. I think that's the most important thing. It's like, how do we want to influence them in this particular way? So there's usually some sort of goal. Even if we've not got a brief, there's usually some sort of goal. So the goal may well just be a product launch. So that might have several goals attached to it. Let's say it's one piece of creative. It's very rarely. It's usually like a campaign shoot with multiple locations and multiple shoots and multiple deliverables and stuff like that. So we're getting across some key points. So maybe that's the features and benefits. That maybe that's who it's for. Maybe that could be some sort of testimonial. Maybe we're bringing in influencers and stuff like that. But it all stems from what do we want the viewer to experience. So it might be educating them. It might be reinforcing some slogan or brand value or something like that. And then you figure out the kind of creative kind of from there, essentially. So there always has to be, someone explained it to me in a different way, and I've completely forgotten the term that they use, but I hate the sort of blank piece of paper. I need at least one or two or three kind of defining sort of points that we need to sort of stick towards. And then, once we've got that goal, we'll figure out how we want it to shoot, how I want to shoot it, how I want to create it, the boring stuff like location, equipment, how we want it to look. And kind of the look's the kind of the biggest thing for us, again, because we're so centered around positioning. We want to make sure that it's on brand. And on brand can mean multiple different things, but it's a catch-all term for making sure it's well positioned. And then it's a case of if it's stills and it's video, which is kind of what we do. It's a shot list. We very rarely storyboard things because it just takes too long. And having a big end, the sort of vision in mind, what it's going to look like, but most importantly, how people are going to react to it, how people are going to perceive it. So all of that, basically.
So you like to do things slightly differently. And rightly so. Do you ever come up against any resistance, or I'm not saying pick and choose your clients, but is it a case of, well, the client isn't right for us because they're not willing to have that little bit of an edge?
No, it's very rare that happens, but I think that might be down to our positioning and the fact that we position ourselves in a particular way that I think a lot of those are sort of disqualified at the point of like seeing who we are and what we do. Excuse me. So that kind of rarely happens. What's worse is it can go too far, and our clients have an idea that I'm like, that will not work. Because there's this thing, you can be really, really creative, but there's no point in being creative for creative's sake. When it comes to business, great if you just want to be creative, but when you need to make a return, it's got to be leading towards some sort of goal, even if not every single piece of content has a sale in mind. It can be leading towards other things. But yeah, it can go the other way where the client's got an idea and I'm like, this is horrible. Like, this is awkwardly bad or strange, or it just won't work. So I will always push back on anything that I don't believe in, and also give a feedback. They're hiring us because we know what we're doing, and it's a big part of the process. It's that kind of relationship between the two of us. But typically, when we're doing some sort of idea development, we're all aware internally as a team, there'll be wild ideas, safe ideas, and something in the middle. So it's very rare that we go to a client with one. We've got a few suggestions, and it'll go through some editing, but there's a spectrum. This is nuts, and we appreciate that you probably won't like this, but we want to put it here anyway because I think it'd be really cool. And then here's 2 steps down from that, and then here's 2 steps down from that, and eventually we get to something that's super safe and super easy. And what do you think? We'll talk them through that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's very rare that we get too much pushback from our sort of creative ideas. But the beautiful thing is, you can be different without being weird.
Yeah.
And you can be creative without having people not understand what it is. I think a lot of people think that Dissident is about, what we do is about like just being wild and crazy for the sake of it, but it's not at all. It is very much just like making all these small differences compiles into a brand that it within X amount of time has kind of separated itself from its competitors, and that's kind of what we want to do. But we definitely have a look and a feel to our kind of creativity.
Yeah.
There's definitely, it's dark and gritty, and I think that's maybe why we kind of fell into the construction industry, because it was always like that, and I think construction brands went, that's pretty cool, I like that. But we do work with healthcare clients as well, so we can turn it down. We can turn the distance sort of down.
I suppose you have to for healthcare clients.
Yeah, but again, still they still like us because we're different and unique. And so if we've got a healthcare provider, let's say it's always private, that are like, well, they want to differentiate themselves from their competitors, and a lot of their competitors' visuals look like stock imagery. We want to make sure that our imagery doesn't look like theirs. So it still has the same effect. It's still very professional, but it's got an edge to it. It's got something. It doesn't have to be nuts, but it could, as long as it's got a little bit of something that differentiates us, then even better.
One thing you just mentioned there that I want to pick up on, stock imagery. So I think the landscape's slightly changed in that perspective, because you can go on various platforms, type something in, and it'll create an image.
Generate it or whatever.
Yeah. Through what we class as AI. And it'll generate, and I've used it, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it's a little crazy, and you end up with people with 6 fingers, and you have to be careful.
I love spotting them on websites and stuff, and I sort of think, because you can usually tell when something's been generated, can't you?
Absolutely. What's your take on stock imagery and using AI to generate imagery for organizations?
Stock imagery, I'm on the fence about, purely because we've got social media clients that we genuinely use stock imagery for. So they don't have a budget for creative, and also the work that they do it's not necessary to go and reshoot something that already exists, because whatever we shoot with them would have to be fake to make it better than the stock imagery. But also, these are brands that are not heavily reliant on their brand imagery. So these are like, we don't do a lot of this work anymore, but local service providers or something like that. So we try and steer clear of that as much as possible. So when it comes to positioning, stock imagery is it's going to limit you in terms of what you can use, because I think there's stock imagery that's great, and there's other stock imagery that's great, but it doesn't quite look right, and that's kind of the thing of it. It doesn't quite look right, don't use it. So if you're a brand that's going in a certain direction visually, that pool is quite limited. But if you're going for generic, healthcare is a really good example of this, because there's so much kind of generic healthcare imagery out there that's diverse. It's ticking all the boxes, but it just looks like somewhere in America. Somewhere fake. So you do have to be very careful with it. If in an ideal world, if budgets weren't a problem with it, which they're usually not for our clients, I would steer well clear. And because most of the time we're working with clients who manufacture something, it's quite hard to get stock imagery in that respect, because it's usually got their products in it, which is why I've never been too concerned about AI for sort of our agency. I've never really worried about it in general, really, but certainly not from the fact that do we need to like upskill or reskill to kind of we definitely do. There's certain elements of AI that I'm like, well, I'd really, really like to get my hands on that. But our clients still produce products, and AI doesn't quite know what that product is yet, because it's not seen it.
Yeah, for sure.
But there are other ways of doing it. But when it comes to generation, AI image generation, I think that's actually quite exciting. Adobe are pulling out some really, really interesting products and developing a lot of like very accessible CGI and modeling. And I think that's really cool, because all of a sudden now we can go to a situation where, it's not going to be super lifelike. It's not going to be, like it might be a bit too polished for most of our clients and most of the uses, but at least we can go like, here's our product in 5 different scenarios that would have taken us ages to shoot, but it's literally just a background. That's it. Our client's product on concrete, our client's product on padstone, on wood, whatever. We didn't need to do it, especially if we can 3D model the lighting. We'd have done that lighting anyway. It's just now I could just press a button. For that kind of thing. But big, serious creative campaigns, you're never going to beat live action, the real deal.
For sure.
So, and I think pretty much all of our clients are sort of on board with that. But then you get into the realms of like social media, and the danger is the brands that don't take social media seriously enough, because of course social media means more content. It's if you're daily posting, that's a lot of content. So you're more inclined to rely on stuff like that because your pool of content may be sort of dwindling. But you need to, if you're not careful, a marketing manager or an MD or whatever will go, actually, stock imagery is fine. But then, of course, it's not. Then you start playing around with brand image and stuff like that. So I think any marketers that take themselves sort of seriously in that regard, especially for manufacturers, will be very careful about that kind of thing.
And I suppose if you're not specific about your needs with stock imagery, there's the chance that someone else is going to use it, and you don't know where and you don't know how. And if particularly it's one of your competitors or someone close to you that uses it, it's not going to take long until people notice that stuff. And that kind of devalues, I feel, what someone puts out there, and devalues you as an organization a little bit. I know people might not be able to afford the likes of yourselves, being smaller organizations, but there's always a way to get better imagery, you know, or more realistic imagery. Even if it's just, I'm a big advocate of, if you can't do it, just use your phone. Anyone can use a phone and get the really good photo. Yeah, it might take you a few goes. You might have to get somebody else that's better at taking a photo to do it. But I would always push, use that instead of some kind of stock imagery. I just, particularly in construction, it might work in other industries, but you're always going to get the hard hat, the high vis, the pointing at something in the distance, and no one does that on a construction. You're never in that position where the sun's shining, and it just doesn't work. No.
It brings us on to one of the issues that we have. Like, we do a lot of productions on site, so that's where you've got lots of people that aren't relative to your production, but they're there anyway. You know, and that makes it really authentic. You've got guys working in the background, guys and girls getting on with their stuff. You know, one of the issues with that is PPE. Like, a lot of the times the guys just won't wear it.
Yeah.
And I'm always amazed that the decision makers in these construction brands and are so funny about the amount of PPE that people are wearing in the background, and I mean, we're going to get complaints about this and complaints about that, but they're quite happy just to use like random stock imagery and all that kind of thing, which is, in my opinion, way worse for your business than that one guy in the background who was told to wear gloves but he didn't. You know, what are you going to do? The industry's so like kind of got their kind of the priorities kind of backwards. You know, that they'll halt a video production for months because we're trying to reshoot someone because they didn't have the right kind of hard hat on, or they were on their phone in the background in a no-phone zone or something like that. And they'll be so picky about that, but the rest of the time, I just chuck that stock image on social media. It's fine.
Yeah, for sure. It is a bit mad, and there are rules and regs, and you don't want to get caught up in any of that. But on the same respect, you've got to look back to those rules and regulations and think, well, are they like fit for purpose then? They're there for safety and protection, and we've got to stick with them. But you know, come on, it's like VAR in football. It's just nuts. Use your your initiative for certain things.
Yeah. It keeps it fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Stock imagery. I'm as a rule, I'm not super elitist about these kinds of things, because there's some businesses that a really, really good example of this, and this is something that is debatable. Let's say you're a brand that, let's say you manufacture drill bits. Okay. So all your content is around drilling and doing all these different activities, and there might be some cool product imagery, there might be some stuff in the studio, might be some stuff on location. It's all looking on brand. Mm-hmm. And then on LinkedIn, you want to post a picture about somebody working at a computer. And at no point have you ever had a content shoot of someone working at their computer. At that point, do you hire a dissident to jump over for $5,000 to go and get that shot? Or do you just use a stock image? And I think in that situation, I would use the stock image. That's a better use of your time and budget. But I think what people don't understand is there are more stock libraries out there than Adobe stock. Broaden the pool.
Definitely.
A little bit more. And also, which something that I don't think people discuss that often is, if you find a really good image that's not a stock image, just reach out to the creator. Say, can I buy that?
Yeah.
And because a lot of the time the best imagery isn't the stock imagery is kind of like they're creating it to put into a stock pool, trying to make it generic. If you find an image of someone working in an office that's like for a different brand or a different company that's not a competitor or whatever, just reach out and say, hey, would you mind if we use that or whatever? And then most of the time they'll just say, give us £100 or something, and you can have it forever. I think that's okay.
Cool.
But maybe AI will fix that. Maybe that'll be a situation where you can almost create your brand palette of like, this is what I want all my imagery to look like. Now someone working at a desk, and it kind of creates something that's kind of on brand, and I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, it'll come. I'm pretty sure it will come. I want to move it on to social, because that's part of what you do, a huge part of what you do. And we spoke about it on your podcast, and saying that the bar is really low to entry on social media, because you can do a lot for free, and you can do creative for free, and you can post for free, and it might not do any good, but some organizations see it as ticking a box, and you've done that and it hasn't worked, so social's not for us, or whatever it might be. And that's nothing to do with the platform, it's the actual output that you're doing. You've got there. So what's your take on the impact social media has had on creativity and creative output?
Oh, in general? I think it's done two things that, off the top of my head. Like, it's done a lot of things, obviously. It'd be a long podcast if I ran through the whole list. It's made content creation, which is like a term that's kind of like, I don't know, I use it, but I think it actually is kind of like, it's like almost like a derogatory term for photography and video production and stuff like that. Content, it seemed to be like less quality videography and photography. It's not. It's just easier to call it that. It's made it really competitive. There's a lot of content creation agencies out there that aren't just like big production companies and big, like really well-known photographers. These are agencies that are like multi-skilled. They do a really good job. So it's made it really competitive, which of course always raises the bar of the quality, which is good. So quality is always stepping up, getting better and better and better, which is always a good thing for the industry. Initially, you get this kind of like at the start of these kinds of trends, kind of everyone suffers apart from a few, and then eventually, once everyone realizes that I've just got to step my game up to be better, then that's good. So it's done that. What I'm concerned about is the UGC. So they've got this UGC, user-generated content, which a lot of brands are using on their platforms. Us included, our brands included, but like we use it. And I always sort of like say to my kind of team, like, use it sparingly, be careful, and sort of, I don't know. what I'm worried about with UGC content is you spend all of this time, and maybe this is just my ego, you spend all of this time crafting this sort of brand image creatively, all the visuals. You've got this, let's say you've got this Instagram grid that looks incredible. It's very on brand. Anytime an image pops up on someone's feed, they go, that's that brand. And that's our client. I'm thinking, yes, this is winning. And then a piece of UGC content is then reposted to their platform from an influencer or somebody or just an end user, and wrecks all of it. Wrecks all of that beautiful visual and that beautiful look, because at that point it's not on brand, it's not well positioned. It's somebody using that person's product that's been shot on a phone, it's got a dirty lens or whatever. And it kind of like, for me, it ruins the experience, the sort of the buyer experience, the visual experience. That's the bit that I'm concerned about. I don't have an answer to it yet, though, unfortunately. So it's kind of one of those things I'm just worried about it, but can't do anything about it because it works kind of for the marketing element. But from a visual and a brand element, I don't like it. So my caveat to that is use it and then archive it straight away. So we're kind of like trialing this kind of thing already of like, for the most part, we're quite careful about what we put out on socials. Not from we don't want to upset people, but I want to make sure it's visually correct, visually on brand. But every now and again, I just want to post something on my phone because it's easy and I'm lazy, and I think that's okay to do from time to time. I want to create something that's a bit more janky and a bit more shaky and not quite the quality. And it's not spent hours in color grading. And it might be something funny, it might be something interesting, and as long as it's on brand, I'm okay to post that. But I'm going to get rid of it in an appropriate amount of time from the public eye, so that when someone does come out over to my platform or to our socials, everything at that point is for the most part on brand, looking good, looking right. So yeah, that's kind of my kind of take on it. Content's getting better. I think what has changed is the requirements from brands has increased. The deliverables has increased. And as a result, I think production values, planning, and the overall quality of visuals, as an average, I'm not talking about any sort of area specifically, will naturally decrease. Because if the budget stays the same, but the deliverables are required on more, and it needs to be a faster turnaround, naturally, the quality is going to get lower.
Okay.
But it's not happened to the point where I think, all social media content's rubbish, but naturally it will be. You know, if you had 50 grand to make a film or 10 films, the one film is always going to look better because it's just got a little bit more thought into it. So that's generally what's happening.
So what's your thoughts on? And you might give me a stock marketing answer here, but what's your thoughts on mastering one channel, or say same budget, so you put it onto one channel, or same budget, you do a little bit but over multiple channels?
I would go more towards that personally. There'd be some that I would obviously avoid. I don't want to. You don't want to be on everywhere at all times. I think if you're going to be really disruptive, just do the one. Just be really careful which one that is. I would personally prefer, if it was me running the marketing, and I'm not the most gifted marketer ever, that's why I typically work with my creative team, I would prefer a brand to be across multiple channels, delivering quality content. But I suppose with the caveat that if you've got limited resources, you're not necessarily going to be able to go, right, here's the strategy for this channel and this channel and this channel. You might have kind of like a broad strategy that kind of works across all of them.
Okay.
And yeah, kind of that's the way that I would go. What's the consensus on that typically? I've never been asked that question before. Would it typically people go one way or the other, do you think?
It depends.
Yeah, it depends.
No, it really depends on the budget and what that thing is trying to achieve.
Yes.
So if you're talking about building brand awareness, you're probably looking at multiple channels.
Yes.
Because you'll hit more of that audience in general. And the science or the rules kind of say that if you want to build a brand, you want to be hitting more of the industry and not just a set target audience. Now, again, that massively depends on who you are and what you're doing.
Yes.
But I'd say if you know your target market is on one channel, if you're a small organization, I'd focus on that one channel and master it. If you've got a slightly bigger budget, I'd look at playing around with other channels.
Yeah.
I'd always keep a little bit of budget back and play around. And particularly if I was working with an agency, I'd say, right, this is our main channel, but here's a little bit more budget. Just have a play around with a few channels for us. See if anything hits, because you don't know what might hit.
I think I might be coming at that answer as well, my own bias of the fact that for the most part we work with manufacturers that sell through a distributor network. So we are marketing first to distributors and then to the end user. So we're like I say, multiple channels seems to work best for this, because if you were to really market towards your customer, which is a distributor, a retailer, you'd be on LinkedIn probably. And if at that point your end user has no idea who you are, so then of course no one's going to buy it. So then you have to kind of spread out in that respect. But there's also the part of me that's I don't like the sort of master of all, sort of master of none type thing. I quite like sort of, if you can niche down on something, please do niche. But there's got to be a lot of research behind there. You've got to make sure it's the right niche 100%. Yeah. But, a classic example of like a little startup business creating some kind of gimmicky tool, for instance, that's actually quite good. Yeah, like slap that on socials. That just needs to go on socials. Yeah. You probably have to have the basics of like a website and some sort of like some way of logistically getting this product to the right people. But so for me, like socials would be the one for that. That doesn't need to go into publications and stuff.
Keep the funnel short.
Exactly. Boom. Yeah, exactly. Especially if it's going straight to consumer.
Yeah.
Classic. It depends. But if it was me, if it was my money, I'd probably just spread it out.
Sure. So just coming back to the creativity, I think we have this need to change things. We have this need to do things differently.
Yes.
And rightly so. Everyone likes new and fresh and creative ideas. But as we know, to build a brand and to build awareness and have that brand recollection in people's minds, we need that consistency. So how do you balance the two? I know you spoke about repositioning and moving a brand into slightly different position. So you're doing that, but obviously you need consistency once you've done that. How do you battle against that and doing things differently all the time? Yeah,
it's that kind of like long-term brand awareness. Let's keep everything consistent against times are changing, trends are coming up, all that kind of thing. It is quite a difficult thing to balance. Now, we sort of lean typically on the values. So I think if you can get a couple of the core things right within a brand, so it's got to be their values, it's got to be their core messaging. That needs to stay the same for the most part. You can tweak these things, as you go, but like without, tip them on their head. For the most part, we work with, like I say, with manufacturers. They're bringing out new products on a regular basis. So that scratches the itch of the new thing. So what we can do is if we have a set look and feel that we have for our client that's on brand, that's saying the right things and that's communicating the right stuff, but we've got a new thing to do it with. It's kind of that's the double whammy there. Yeah. So we can continue doing this with this in a slightly different way, because it's a new product and stuff like that. But from our perspective as a content agency that gets paid on a monthly basis to shoot new stuff, it would get pretty repetitive if we were just basically just like rehashing the same things over and over again. So yeah, typically I don't have a lot of experience in it because we're the guys that you hire to make things that are new. So I don't really get that involved, or we don't get that involved in decisions like earlier on of just like, should it be like this? But my answer would be, if it's working, continue and keep testing. I would say so. You can kind of like, I think there's you don't necessarily have to just do the same thing constantly. as long as it's got the right sort of fundamentals there, you can sort of dip off and sort of branch out briefly and in small ways to different areas to see if that's working over here. And you can slowly kind of meander in a slightly different direction and see if that works, rather than just tipping it on its head. That's a tough one. So really, it's a really, because the kind of marketer in me is like, stay the course, stay the course. Like, no, but your consumer's not fed up of that content yet. I know you are, because you've seen it loads of times, but your consumer's not seen that, not all of them. So keep going on that and make your money's worth. As an agency owner, I'm thinking, you need to shoot some more stuff, make some new things or whatever. It is a tough one. I think if you're a really, really well-established brand, you can take your foot off the gas when it comes to stuff like that. When it comes to new, super creative and innovative ideas, when it comes to marketing, I think when you're a bit more of a challenger brand, you're trying to find the next new creative thing to do that's like going to get eyeballs on you. So I almost kind of encourage that, but that's because they've not got like 50 years of history behind that particular brand, or if they're already struggling, it's like, go for it, go and do what you want.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, you got nothing to lose at this point. And I quite like those stories, and they're the kind of brands that we typically like to work with. It's either they're quite new to the market, they're maybe perhaps not a new brand, but quite new to the market.
Okay.
And we get to do some fun stuff with them. We wouldn't get hired necessarily by the guys that are like, stay the course, as a rule.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to finish the conversation with one final topic, because I think it'll add a lot of value to people that are looking to work with any type of agency or any type of creative, okay? And that's around briefs, right? So if I was to come to you with the perfect brief, right, what does that look like?
Okay.
What do I need to add? And is there anything in addition to if we're calling a brief a piece of paper or a document,
yes,
is there anything else you need from me?
Oh, that's it's quite nice, as we talked about this in our previous podcast that we did on my show. You have to remind me of it. It was time, budget, and resource.
That's the one.
Yeah. So they're the three fundamentals of. And if you're missing, I could live without time, but budget and resource are huge. Time's a bit of a weird one for production, because it's like, we can do this. We can kind of do it anywhere. Where time becomes important is how quickly do you need this done, because that's going to influence the cost. So time, as in the constraints, like, okay, we're going to shoot it in the summer, but I need it by here, or I'm going to shoot it next week, but I need it by Thursday or something like that. It's going to make a huge difference. The budget's really important, not because we can charge you more, but because we know what we can work with. We know what resource we can bring to the table. And I think a lot of people are scared about budget because how much is this? And I'm like, I don't know. It could be this or something in the middle. I genuinely don't know. It depends on what you want to get from it. So budget's huge for us, because at least it gives us a restriction. And then you got the resource, which is what stuff can you bring to this. And so what I would want to see is a theme, the thought behind it, the process. The strategy, kind of like in terms of like the objective or the goal, like what are we trying to do, and that'll really help. So even things down to like the if it's a product, is I want the features and benefits. Who's it for? Even the what do you call them? My words aren't coming out today. Like the data around the end user. You know what I mean? Like the
target
avatar.
Market.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like that's really, really important. Channels, where's it going? It's really important. If we're making a film, does it need to be vertical? The obvious ones. Does it need to be vertical? Does it need to be landscape? Does it need to be both? They're hugely important. These are all follow-up questions. Like my next email is, right, okay, let me ask all these questions. So that's super, super important. I had a really, really good brief recently, and there was a couple of things on there that surprised me. They added kit onto the list. They didn't need to do that. They don't need to tell me what kit I need to bring to a production.
That's a bit OTT.
Yeah, but it was cool because it was pretty much bob on.
Right,
it was
nice.
like they knew their stuff. Yeah, relatively. I would say that's kind of it at this point. Some sort of description, what they want, and what they want the customer to feel, what they want the end users to feel.
Interesting.
I think that's really, really important, especially when it comes to video production, but also photography, because we can make something. We can kind of run any emotion, really, depending on the production. So we can tap into fear. You know, we can tap into like almost like. Lust isn't the right term, but you know when you lust, you know when you just really want a product because you're such a nerd about a certain thing. So you can sort of like lean into that. I'm definitely like that when it comes to camera equipment, lusting for camera equipment.
That's why you didn't need that list.
Yeah. So yeah, emotion is absolutely massive because that'll really determine the rest of the film to some extent, because we can't make some like jam-packed action film that's meant to really be about something that's more thought-provoking or something like that. So that's huge.
So I'll finish on this. How much is, because I've done creative before. I've worked with creative agencies, and I quite like to visualize it and the output and I might have a strong feeling about what I want it to look like, or I might sort of say I want it to have this emotion linked to it. Go nuts, either or. But if somebody comes to you and they say, you know exactly what they want, and you can visualize something, you're like, that's it. How close is that visualization to what you end up creating?
My own visualization.
Yeah. Or whatever the team and the agency decides. It should look like this, and it's going to be like this, and that's going to happen. Is that what happens, or is there some leeway to it?
Yeah,
does it change?
I would say if you put it on, let's call it a percentage. So we've got an idea in our, but it's usually in your head. So this is why I'm really excited for AI to get better, so that we can start putting like our ideas into visuals and kind of have them kind of generate stuff. We've played with it, but it's never quite right.
Yeah.
It kind of gives you like a rough idea of like the colors and the mood and the theme. I would say, from visualization of what I want a film to look like from the very beginning to the point where it ends up at the end of the production. So that's not necessarily the start of the production, the end of the production. It's the first, sort of like, this is how I want this. This is going to be my baby. It's probably 70%. It's probably 70% roughly what I want it to be. So sometimes that'll be resource, we haven't got enough resource. There was a few key elements in this film that I really wanted that got cut or something like that, and I was like, that was really important for the visuals or whatever. Or there's certain things that sort of like that get let down or whatever, and also just like general sort of like experience and skill. You got an idea of what you wanted to do. You've never done it before. You did it 70% correct or 8% correct or whatever. You just sort of like, okay, I was going for Hollywood action film in my head or something that by an incredible director. We managed to get 80 to 70% of that. I'm pretty happy with that, based on the fact that we had 30 grand to play with or whatever. So yeah, about 70% is probably about right. I never thought about that though. It's kind of quite an interesting... And also, of course, some of these things never happen.
Of course.
You get to the point where you get a brief, and then you have an idea in your head, and then they go, actually, we're going to go in a completely different direction. So that in those situations, 0%, because we go, we're still going to do a film with you, but it's not going to be this. It's going to be something completely different. Okay, fair enough. I was getting quite excited about that one.
Is there ever been anything, and this will be the final question, has there ever been anything on that respect then that you've got, that'd be really cool, we can do this or we can do that, and that can happen, this can happen, and then it hasn't happened? Is there maybe one that sticks out, or one thing you can remember that you wish you'd created, but it just didn't happen because there was a change in direction or the budget wasn't there? Or
I can tell you a good story of something that actually, it would start off as a disaster, but I think it ended up being better. So we were booked to be on a production on a building site. It was a new build site. Quite a big one. It's quite a big contractor as well. And we've been sort of let in by a contact of one of the sales guys of the client of our client. That he said, we got the go ahead to go on this site. We've got a 1-day shoot here to go and film a production of this nail gun. Really, really cool product. We'd already done all the stuff in the studio. This was going to be the site film, the real kind of gritty one. So we got a big team together. We'd done a shot list. I was meant to be directing on that particular day. We just bought a new camera. It was all very, very exciting. There was a team of probably like 5 production crew, a behind the scenes photographer or something like that, drone pilots, and the client. There was 2 or 3 of those guys. We got the model for the day, which was one of these builders, I think, and it was quite a big production. And then we literally got through the gates, and the health and safety guy was like, "You've got no chance, no way. All of you guys are coming here. We've got a cart of equipment with us." And this was a lot of money. It's a big production. And he's like, "You got no chance." Like, I was expecting one guy with a camera. I was expecting for an hour. So I think that somewhere down the line, there'd been a miscommunication. This was going to be like an interview, like for the news or something. Or, you know what I mean? And they were like, yeah, it's fine. So we couldn't fly the drone over the thing. We couldn't get anybody in. Eventually, they let us in there, I think, for 2 or 3 hours max. And it was going to be one videographer, the client who ended up having to be the model, because the guy who was supposed to be the model ended up being the guy that had to chaperone us everywhere on this site. And it got to the point where it was like, who's going to film it? And I was sort of looking around. I'm like, well, I've got the blooming shot list and I've created it. And I am a videographer and a photographer, so I can do this kind of thing. I've got videographers here that don't really know what they're doing because I'm supposed to be directing and all that kind of thing. So I was like, sorry, I'll do it. I had to learn my new camera really quickly, which was fine. And we shot it in this 2 or 3 hour kind of window or something. It's supposed to be a full day up in Manchester, and there was hotels and drinks and all that kind of thing. And it ended up being, long story short, a really cool film, like really good. On a shoestring. I got these like a pocket light, these kind of LEDs that you can kind of carry, about that big. Use that as a light source and use natural light and all this kind of thing. And to this day, it's still one of my favorite films. I don't know whether it's because it's come out of such hardship of just oh no, what are we going to do? And we actually created something really cool. So what I find interesting about that is, would the original plan have actually been better? And I'd like to think it would be. We'd certainly get more content out of it. But there's a part of me that's like, no, I think this was the only way. It's the only way it could have gone. It should have been quick and dirty, get the shots, get it done, and end up being like a really professional, really cool film. And I wonder that the way that we'd planned it, it might have been a bit too static, a bit too many moving parts. It just needs to be a guy with a camera and a light and some movement. But luckily, there'd been a lot of planning ahead of time. Otherwise, if it was just me shooting it with no plan, it'd been screwed. But yeah, that's the one time that's kind of like it's like the opposite of what you asked.
Yeah, for sure.
So something screwed up. It ended up, I think it probably was better than the original.
But I think that's a really good tale for any kind of creativity or any kind of creative, is that there isn't just one way of doing it. There's never just one way of doing it, and things will change. And things will change naturally, and people will stop you doing things.
Yes.
But there's always a way around it. There's always a solution, and I suppose it goes with the industry. It goes with what you do. That finding those solutions probably is where those diamonds are. In that rough.
Yeah, I think it's quite difficult for real true creatives that are grafters, because you do get creatives that are just like, nah. As soon as it becomes difficult, I'm out. I've always said construction and tradespeople has always been very creative as well. There's so many similarities between like a carpenter and a videographer. It's just, you got to find them, but they're there.
Yeah.
Very similar mentalities. It's always really interesting that we get on really well with tradespeople, because I think we've just got this weird common ground between us. Even though we look very different on a site, it's a lot of the same stuff. It's about problem solving and coming up with solutions and having experience to go, I could do this 4 or 5 different kinds of ways, but I'm going to choose this one because I think that's the best solution. But you'd be hard pressed when you come across a situation like that for a videographer just go, okay, I'm not going to bother.
Yeah.
They'll always persevere. They'll find a way around. If people are telling them no, they'll be like, okay, cool. I'll leave then. They're sort of filming as there's always going to be a way of coming through that, because at the end of the day, you want to create something. It's not like a job where it's like, oh, if I get let off for the day, that's a nice easy day. It's like, no, exactly. I wanted to make this today. So it's going to be really cool. So
for sure.
Yeah.
Excellent. Dan, thank you so much for opening up, letting us use the studio.
It's been fun.
Should have brought my own branding really, but didn't.
Well, I will do it digitally. It'll be fine.
Oh, fine. AI. Maybe sorted it. No, absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.